During the golden era of primetime television, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour came with charm, with wit, and with an edge that cut sharp but was hidden beneath its clean surface. CBS had anticipated a harmless, crowd-pleasing variety show, something to battle Bonanza, not rock America's conscience. But with the cultural wave of the 1960s rolling in, the show was soon a lightning rod of satire, of rebellion, of raw commentary. Tension backstage thickened with each punchline that landed too close to power. And then, suddenly, it occurred, on tape, unbroadcast, a decision made behind doors, and a show removed from the calendar. The instant didn't only silence a show, it revealed the boundaries of free speech in mass media. And it all began with one scene too daring to be watched. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. When the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour premiered in 1967, it was a counter-programming maneuver by CBS to win back Sunday night viewers from NBC's perennially popular Western drama, Bonanza. CBS's programming was generally more conservative during this period. Programs such as the Beverly Hillbillies and the Ed Sullivan Show appealed to a post-war American audience bent on tradition. Tom and Dick Smothers, whose wholesome musical comedy duet was familiar to television audiences, appeared to be a sure thing to revamp the variety format without offending mainstream audiences. The brothers were seen by network executives as entertainers who could provide humor without offending. The first several episodes provided just that, light-hearted comedy, musical sketches, and the brothers' trademark sibling sparring. The show met CBS's standards for family television, and early response was good. It found popularity with a wide audience and fulfilled the network's objectives in rating and content tone. But in contrast to most other variety shows, the Smothers Brothers had artistic control in their contract, an unusual stipulation that provided them with greater autonomy than most entertainers on the networks. This provision would become crucial later when the show branched out from its original intent. Where CBS saw it as a ratings phenomenon, Tom and Dick turned the show into a creative arena to be fully realized. They brought in a younger, more liberal writing staff, whose voices resonated with the ever more turbulent social waters of late 1960s existence. Their very presence was reflected in early stylings, which reshaped the level of energy on the show before any overt indications of political material were on hand. The program started to drift away from its vaudevillian skits towards more substantial, more acidic, mixed responses to contemporary issues with creativity. These initial structural and stylistic developments went on to become what would ultimately be a profoundly charged program, but as yet, change was technological and atmospheric rather than brazenly ideological. By the mid-1967 season, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was attracting a new kind of audience, young people who were starved for material that engaged the generation's culture conflicts. Indeed, the show's popularity on college campuses and among youth culture so sharply juxtaposed with television's previous understandings of segments that network attitudes about segments began to change. Despite being slow to catch on, CBS was starting to regard the show as something beyond a filler. It was gradually becoming a generational redefinition of television. The rise was more than just a ratings phenomenon, it marked a transformation of the medium itself, from passive entertainment to active reflection of a changing society. But behind the scenes, a single brother was rewriting the playbook for what this program, and television itself, could accomplish. While CBS worked to capture Sunday evening audiences, Tom Smothers was building a stealth revolution behind the veil of a variety show. As a child of 1960s counterculture, Tom was more and more obligated to leverage the platform not only for amusement but also for reflection and rebellion. Rather than engage CBS directly, he chose a more covert strategy, planting political and social commentary within shows that initially flew under the network's radar. Comedy sketches acquired double meanings, folk songs became allegories, and satire substituted for slapstick. It was a calculated, strategic transformation that started at the periphery before it reached the core. Tom's version of television activism was not declarative like most, but strategic. He bucked at the network's boundaries not in rebellion, but in timing and nuance. Thus, when CBS anticipated the inclusion of establishment musical acts, Tom booked Pete Seeger and Joan Baez, artists with anti-establishment reputations. Their presence, while justifiable on artistic merit, brought political undertones that changed the viewer's experience. Tom coded these decisions as entertainment, rather than protest, so he could maintain control while promoting a larger message. It wasn't what was being said, it was how and when it was said. The show's comedic voice matured with time. Tom hired a new crop of writers, such as Steve Martin and Rob Reiner, who were immersed in satirical culture and had a healthy dose of skepticism regarding authority. From one-liners, the content had moved to parables, from gags to commentaries. The monologues started out as poor imitations of press conferences, political campaigns, and church sermons, for laughter as reflections of the American power structures. Tom rarely devoted his on-screen time to structuring ideas rather than overpowering them. This up-close and personal relationship and behind-the-scenes effort was his understated transformation, actually, his defining of the show not as a celebrity but in tandem with strategies. This defining ultimately would change the entire relationship television had with politics. Tom's slow introduction of commentary set the stage for the show's more explicitly political moments down the road, like Pat Paulson's campaign satires and David Steinberg's brief sermonettes. His success wasn't even so much about what he said, however, it was also a matter of demonstrating that comedy could conduct strategic attacks, disrupting, informing, and inciting, within the boundaries of primetime television. By the time CBS realized what was being altered, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was already something they never wanted, a whole lot more than variety show, but a front line in the fight for free speech and media accountability. As the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour took off, it increasingly became apparent that its musical guests were selected not only for entertainment purposes, they were voices of a generation calling for change. Unlike the other variety shows of the period, which mostly included apolitical or sanitized acts, Tom Smothers brought in artists who had music that confronted the political and social turmoils of the 1960s directly. Pete Seeger's appearance was a watershed. Network television blacklisted since the McCarthy period, Seeger sang his anti-war ballad, Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, a thinly veiled attack on President Lyndon B. Johnson and the Vietnam War. CBS first suppressed the segment, but after an outcry and Tom Smothers' continued lobbying, the network broadcast it, one of the first overtly political songs seen in American prime time. The program went on to employ its musical platform as a cultural protest stage. Joan Baez, who was a well-known anti-war and civil rights protester, employed her visits to call attention to causes beyond the usual variety show fare. In one of its more hot-button moments, she performed a dedication to her then-spouse, David Harris, a man who had been jailed for draft resistance. While the dedication was edited out of the U.S. broadcast, the performance itself highlighted the human cost of political belief. Performances such as Jefferson Airplane brought the style of the psychedelic culture to the mainstream, playing songs that played off substance culture and cohort disillusionment. Their music, although coded, was a clear call to awareness for young audience members. No performance perhaps better captured the conflict between rebellion and broadcast standards than the infamous performance of The Who. Infamously out of control on stage, the band capped their rendition of My Generation when they destroyed their instruments, shorting out CBS sound system for the remainder of the live broadcast. Even though demonstrably a part of an orchestrated performance, it was symptomatic of a broader rejection of institutional standards, a metaphor fitting for a production committed to breaking down the very traditional frameworks of television. Every performance on the music show was a statement of culture, and CBS's national stage offered the broadest reach to stimulate free thought, to challenge power, and to raise voices in protest movements. Behind the walls of CBS, the executives were growing increasingly concerned about the music selected for the show. What had started as taste with an edge had become full-fledged defiance, both lyrically and through the artists themselves, many of whom had been blacklisted and banned, once deemed too provocative for network television. This left the network with little else to do. The more of its conservative market affiliates complained and the more its sponsors grew uneasy, the more CBS started clamping down on any guest appearances on the show and examining its musical content with utmost scrutiny. Still, The Smothers Brothers and their writers were convinced music would turn public opinion around and that television did not have to be simply passive entertainment but rather an active agent of change. One of the most iconic features of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was the recurring presence of comedian Pat Paulsen as a deadpan, satirical presidential candidate. Brought on board during the 1968 election cycle, Paulsen's make-believe campaign was intended as a spoof, yet rapidly evolved into a biting critique of American politics. Airing a monotone tone and overtly ridiculous guarantees, Paulsen satirized the rhetoric of actual politicians, laying bare the vacuity and circular reasoning that is common in political oratory. Catchphrases such as, "If I am elected, I will construct additional potholes to try the patience of the voters," became instant hits, appealing to a generation of politically disillusioned people let down by political doublespeak, the war in Vietnam, and government overreach.